I used to say, my life is simple, whenever people asked. I love my job, I love my boyfriend, and I love quiet nights. Evan would smile and answer, she's the calm one. I'm the mess. I believed him. For 7 years I believed everything he said. I believed when he promised, 1 more year and we'll settle down. I believed when he said, you're my future. I shaped my life around those words, even when my own dreams stayed silent. Can you stay late tonight? Evan asked one evening, phone pressed to his ear. Work emergency. I said, of course, without thinking. When he missed my call later, I told myself, he's busy. When he replied hours later with, sorry, long meeting, I typed, it's okay, and meant it. Trust made excuses before pain could speak. My sister Maya noticed first. You don't smile the same, she said over the phone. I laughed and replied, you worry too much. She pushed. Does Evan still look at you the way he used to? I snapped, we're adults, Maya. Love changes. The words tasted bitter, but I swallowed them. Evan stopped asking about my day. When I asked about his, he said, it's complicated. Or, not now. One night I whispered, did I do something wrong? He sighed and answered, why do you always make things heavy? I apologized immediately. I'm sorry, I said, shrinking inside myself. He didn't respond. Earlier that day, Evan texted, running late again. I replied, dinner. He answered, rain check. I typed, miss you, then deleted it. Maya messaged, coffee later? I said, maybe. I told myself, stop being dramatic. I rehearsed excuses out loud. He's tired. Work is hard. Love is patient. I looked at my reflection and asked, when did I become this quiet? The mirror didn't answer. My phone buzzed again. Evan wrote, talk tomorrow. I whispered, tomorrow for what? The silence felt heavier than anger, but I still picked up my keys and left. The cafe was supposed to be a surprise. I thought, I'll bring him his favorite coffee. When I pushed the door open, laughter hit me first. A woman said, Evan, stop, in a voice I knew too well. Lena, my childhood friend, my sister in everything but blood. I froze. Evan was holding her hand, not casually, not by accident. She leaned into him and said, I hate hiding. He replied softly, soon, I promise. My coffee slipped from my fingers and hit the floor. Lena looked up and whispered, oh. Evan stood so fast his chair fell back. I can explain, he said. I asked, how long? My voice didn't sound like mine. Evan rubbed his face. It just happened. I laughed once and said, 7 years don't just disappear. Lena tried. I never meant to hurt you. I stared at her and said, you were my home. People watched. I felt nothing and everything. Evan reached out. Please don't do this here. I answered, you already did. No tears came. No screaming followed. I turned, walked out, and realized with terrifying clarity that the life I trusted had already ended. I told myself, one coffee won't hurt. I didn't know I was walking toward the moment that would split my life in two forever, silently, completely. I didn't sit down. I said, start talking. Evan looked at Lena and said, you're not letting me explain. I answered, explain what, the lies or the years? Lena whispered, please don't yell. I said, I'm not yelling. I'm listening. Evan rubbed his hands and said, work was killing me. I felt invisible. I laughed and asked, so you made me invisible first? He said, I fell out of love. The words landed like stones. Lena stared at the table. I said, look at me. She shook her head. I didn't plan this, she murmured. I replied, neither did I. Evan reached for me. We didn't mean to hurt you. I stepped back and said, you meant to hide. My chest felt hollow. I remembered holidays when Evan held me close and promised, always us. I asked, was that fake too? He whispered, it was real then. I asked, when did it stop? Evan said, I don't know. Lena finally spoke. We tried to stop. I said, you tried not to feel guilty. Silence spread between us. I heard my own voice say, I supported you when you had nothing. Evan said, I know. I said, I waited for you every night, he replied. I was confused. I nodded and said, confusion is a choice. I stood and said, I'm done. Evan said, where will you go? I answered, anywhere you aren't. Lena cried, I'm sorry. I looked at her and said, so was I. I went home, packed my clothes, and zipped my life into one suitcase. Rain soaked my shoes as I left. Evan texted, please talk. I didn't reply. I called Maya. She said, I'm here. I said, he chose her. She stayed quiet. I said, it hurts everywhere. She whispered, come home. I answered, I can't. My voice broke. I said, I trusted them. Maya breathed with me until I could stand again. The room I rented smelled like dust and soap. I dropped the suitcase and sat on the floor. I said out loud, it's over. No one answered. Betrayal wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It emptied me. I lay back and stared at the ceiling, knowing I lost love and blood in the same night. I checked my phone again. No new messages. I whispered, that's it. I thought about birthdays, shared meals, and nights I defended him. I said, I chose you every day. The walls stayed quiet. I stood up and said, I won't beg. My hands shook as I washed my face. I looked tired and older. I said, this is real. I sent Maya my location. She replied, I'm proud of you. I cried then quietly because no one was watching. I lay on the bed and said, tomorrow I will survive. The rain tapped the window like a weak apology. I closed my eyes and let the silence stay. I understood something painful. Love could leave without warning. Trust could break without sound. I said, I will remember this feeling. I promised, I will not forget myself again. My chest still hurt, but I breathed through it. I turned off the light and said, goodbye. The darkness answered by staying still. Alone, I finally accepted that everything had changed. I sat up once more and whispered, this is the end. My voice sounded steady. I held my knees and waited for sleep. Came slowly. Pain stayed, but hope, small and quiet, stayed too. I promised myself to keep breathing, keep moving, and never let silence erase me again. That night marked the true beginning of my survival story. I stopped answering my phone. I watched it light up and go dark. Maya called. Evan texted. I let the silence swallow me. I told myself, I'm tired. I told myself, later. Later never came. Days passed. I quit my job by email. My manager replied, are you sure? I typed, yes. My hands didn't shake. That scared me. I sat on my bed and said, who am I now? No one answered. I replayed everything. I said, if I was better, he wouldn't leave. I said, if I was smarter, he'd stay. I hated how easily I blamed myself. Love felt like a mistake. I asked the room, was I ever enough? The walls stayed quiet. I pressed my hands to my chest and said, I don't feel anything. That scared me more than pain. Maya knocked and said, you're coming with me. I said, I'm fine. She replied, you're not. We sat in Dr. Harris's office. Dr. Harris asked, why are you here? I shrugged and said, my life ended. She said, tell me about him. I answered, I loved him more than myself. She asked, and what did that cost you? I opened my mouth and nothing came out. My chest burned. Dr. Harris said, you sound empty. I whispered, he didn't just leave. She waited. I said, he chose someone else. Saying it hurt more than screaming. Dr. Harris nodded and said, that changes things. I nodded too. I stared at the floor and said, I wasn't special. She replied, you were faithful. I laughed bitterly and said, that didn't save me. At home I stared at my phone. I deleted Evan's number. I said, he replaced me. The truth felt sharp. Anger faded. Pain stayed. I told myself, don't disappear. I stood in the bathroom and said, I'm still here. My voice sounded weak, but it existed. I repeated, I'm still here, until it felt real. Maya called again. I answered. She said, I'm proud of you for going. I replied, I feel small. She said, small doesn't mean gone. I asked, what if I never feel whole? she answered. Then we built something new. I breathed out slowly and said, I'm trying. That night I sat alone and talked to myself. I said, I loved deeply. I said, that isn't shameful. My reflection looked back quietly. I added, I won't vanish. I touched the mirror and whispered, you mattered. My eyes filled, but I didn't look away. I said, stay. I don't know who I'll become. I only know this. I will not disappear because they chose each other. I will stay. I will survive. I don't know how yet, but I will keep breathing, keep standing, and keep choosing myself, even when it hurts, even when I feel lost, even when the silence tries to pull me under. I walked into Clara's studio and said, I'm here about the temp position. She looked up from her sketches and asked, you design? I nodded. I did a long time ago. She studied me and said, let's see what you've got. My hand shook, but I took out my notebook of sketches. She flipped through them quickly. Not bad, she said. Not bad. I asked. Not bad is a start, she replied. I smiled faintly. It wasn't praise, but it was real. I'll show you the tools, Clara said, leading me to a workbench. I asked, I haven't done this in years. She replied, you'll learn again. I'll guide you. I hesitated. What if I fail? She looked me straight in the eyes. Then you try again. That's how art works. Her confidence felt contagious. I said quietly, I'll try. The first day I struggled. I cut a wire wrong and said, I ruined it. Clara came over. You didn't ruin it. You learned what not to do. I muttered, it still looks ugly. She laughed softly. Ugly today, beautiful tomorrow. Patience. Her words sank in deeper than I expected. I breathed and tried again. During a break, my phone buzzed. Evan. The message said, I hope you're okay. I stared at it and typed nothing. I told myself, he left. He's not my concern. Clara asked, everything all right? I said, fine. She nodded and didn't pry. That was enough. I liked that she didn't push me to explain. I kept working, letting my hands guide me. I said, it feels good. Clara smiled. I told you talent is still there. I laughed, a small genuine sound. I forgot it could feel like this. She leaned against the bench. You don't need him to remember who you are. I whispered, I'm trying to remember. The next project, she asked. Do you want to design something for yourself? I hesitated. For me. She nodded. No one else. Just for you. I looked at the blank metal and said, yes. I worked carefully shaping it, imagining a future I hadn't allowed myself to dream of. Evan texted again. Can we talk? I ignored it. I said aloud, not waiting for him anymore. Clara glanced up. Good. Focus on what you can build. I nodded. Each small creation brought a quiet thrill. I think I'm getting it back, I said. Your confidence is contagious, she said. I smiled, realizing it wasn't her confidence, it was mine returning. By the end of the week, I held a finished piece in my hands. I whispered, I made this. Clara said, you did. You always could. I felt a spark I hadn't felt in months. Fear still lingered, but determination was stronger. I looked at my hands and said, I don't need to wait for anyone to choose me. Clara nodded. Good. You chose yourself. That night I cleaned my bench and whispered, I'm coming back. Slowly, but I'm coming back. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew that building something with my hands, was my first step toward becoming whole again. I smiled faintly and said, I'll survive. I'll rebuild. The feeling wasn't complete yet, but it was mine. I looked at my reflection in the studio window and said, I'm still here. I'm still me. Clara packed her bag and said, tomorrow we start again. I nodded. Tomorrow, I repeated, feeling a quiet fire ignite. I wasn't waiting for anyone to choose me anymore. I was choosing myself. I heard the bell jingle and froze. I didn't turn around at first, but then I saw him. Evan. My hands shook and I muttered, what are you doing here? He stepped closer, face tense. I needed to see you. I said, why now? He swallowed. I regret everything. Lena, she's not what I thought. I stayed silent, letting the words hang. He added, I never wanted to hurt you. I looked down at my hands and whispered, "Then why did you?" I was blind," he said. "I didn't see what I had." I didn't answer. My chest tightened, but I realized something I hadn't expected. I didn't miss him. Not really. I missed the woman I was before betrayal, the me that trusted and believed. I said quietly, "That me is gone." He frowned. "I can fix this." I shook my head. "No. You can't fix what's broken." Clara appeared from the back and said, "Eva, focus on your work." I nodded, still staring at him. Evan whispered, "Please, just one chance." I said, "I'm not that person anymore." He stepped back, defeated. I watched him leave, and I felt a strange mix of emptiness and relief. Later, Clara said, "You can't keep looking back." I said, "I know, but it's hard." She smiled softly. "I'm not asking you to forget. Just don't let him steal your energy." I nodded and returned to my bench. That's when Noah came in, holding a stack of papers. He said, "Your designs are impressive." I blinked. "Thank you," I replied. He added, "There's potential here. You just need the right exposure." I smiled faintly. "I'm trying." He leaned on the table casually, studying my work. "You don't need validation from anyone else," he said. I looked down at my pieces and whispered, "I'm learning that." Noah nodded, then left quietly, letting me work without pressure. It felt good, focusing on my craft instead of the past. The studio door opened again. I glanced up. Evan lingered by the entrance, watching. I took a deep breath and said aloud, "I'm done looking back." I picked up a small pendant I had just finished and walked toward the door. He didn't move. I said firmly, "This is my life now." He watched silently as I passed him, then left. I didn't turn back. I could feel his gaze, but it didn't reach me anymore. I whispered to myself, "I'm choosing myself." Clara called from the back, "Keep going. Don't let anyone stop you." I smiled faintly, gripping my tools. "I won't." I walked to my workbench and said, "I am still here. I am still me." The quiet studio felt like a sanctuary. Noah's encouragement and Clara's guidance anchored me. And Evan's regret? It didn't hurt anymore. I was walking forward on my terms, and this time, no one could follow me without my permission. I whispered once more, almost to the empty room, "I'm free." My hands rested on the pendant I had made, and I felt it. Solid, real mine. Nothing could touch that, not him, not Lena, not the past. I was rebuilding, and this time I was the one holding the pieces. I got a text from Maya. Heard from someone. Evan lost his job. I stared at my phone and muttered, "Figures." I knew Lena would be furious. Another message came. Apparently, she's controlling him even more now. I whispered, "That's sad." My chest tightened. Part of me felt relief, another part a sharp pang I couldn't name. I called Clara. "You won't believe what I just heard," I said. She sighed. "Don't let it pull you back." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "I know, but it's hard not to think about it." She replied, "Focus on your world, not theirs." I repeated it to myself, but my mind flickered to their faces, to the home I once shared with Evan. Noah arrived with his laptop. "Ready to pitch to investors?" he asked. I swallowed. "As ready as I'll ever be." He smiled and said, "You've got this." I set up my designs, my hands steady now, no shaking, only determination. I whispered, "I'm here, I'm doing it." During the pitch, I spoke clearly. "This collection represents strength and transformation." An investor interrupted. "Why should we invest?" I said firmly, "Because it's not just jewelry. It's resilience you can wear." I caught Noah's eye. He nodded, encouraging silently. My heart thumped, but I didn't falter. Afterwards, one investor said, "We'll back this project." I exhaled. "We did it," I whispered. Noah smiled. "You did it. They can't touch this." I realized it wasn't about revenge. It was about proving to myself I could grow, even if they tried to break me. Clara later asked, "How do you feel hearing about them now?" I said, conflicted, relief and sadness. She nodded. "That's natural. Karma isn't sweet. It's heavy." I looked at my hands. "It feels more like justice than joy." She said, "Exactly. And it's your life to shape, not theirs to control." I thought about Evan, about Lena, and I whispered, I hope they learn. I hope they see themselves. I didn't mean it cruelly. I meant it as a truth, detached and calm. Their pain wasn't mine to celebrate. Mine was in creating, in surviving, in choosing me over the past. Noah asked, what's next for you? I smiled faintly. Keep building. Keep moving forward. Keep designing my life. He said, good answer. Focus on growth, not the past. I nodded, repeating the mantra in my head. Growth, not the past. That night, I packed my designs carefully, placing each piece in its box. I whispered to myself, I'm moving forward. They're falling apart. I'm still standing. The satisfaction wasn't bitter. It was quiet, solid, earned. My reflection caught in the glass and I said, you are stronger than you knew. I let the words sink in. Later, Maya texted, proud of you. I typed back, thank you. I'm learning to be proud of myself too. The weight of their chaos didn't touch me anymore. I wasn't just surviving, I was ascending piece by piece, design by design, leaving their broken world behind. I whispered before turning off the light, I'm still me. I'm still moving. And this time, no one else decides my worth. The room felt quiet and safe. I breathed deeply, feeling the power shift settle inside me. I was finally the one holding control. I stared at my phone. Evan's name flashed across the screen. Can we meet? I stared longer. My fingers hovered. Why now? I muttered aloud. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part wanted answers. I whispered, I need closure or revenge. My chest tightened. I paced the apartment. What will I even say? I asked myself, can I forgive? Should I? I typed deleted, typed again. Finally I replied, tomorrow. At the park. My hand shook as I set the phone down. I whispered, this is it. One conversation. When I arrived, he was sitting on a bench. He looked smaller, somehow older. I said quietly, you asked to see me. He looked up, eyes wide, and said, I ruined everything. I know that now. I nodded. You hurt me. You replaced me. He swallowed. I'm sorry. Truly. I studied him. He seemed genuine and it stung more than anger. I thought I could fix what I felt, he said. I lost sight of what mattered. I asked, and now? He lowered his head. Now. I want another chance. I want us back. I laughed softly, bitterly. Do you hear yourself? I whispered. Betrayal doesn't deserve forgiveness just because it hurts later. He blinked. Eva, please. I made mistakes, but I interrupted. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to end this chapter. He flinched. So you won't listen? I said firmly. I listened enough for a lifetime. I won't give more. I stepped closer. I won't scream. I won't cry. You don't get that satisfaction. He looked stricken. I continued. I'm walking away. Not because I hate you. Not because I love someone else. Because I love myself enough to leave. He whispered. Eva? I shook my head. This is my choice. My steps were steady as I moved past him. He reached out, but I didn't flinch or stop. I whispered under my breath. I choose peace over pain. I choose me. I glanced once over my shoulder. His expression was a mix of regret and disbelief. I said quietly to myself, I'm free now. The park smelled like rain and grass, but it felt like the first time I could breathe in months. I kept walking. I repeated, I'm walking away. My hands unclenched. My chest eased. I smiled faintly, small but real. This is my victory, I whispered. Not in yelling, not in tears, but in quiet, deliberate choice. I crossed the park, sunlight catching the edges of the trees. I whispered again, I am enough. I am whole. I am leaving him behind. Each step forward was a promise. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. By the time I reached the sidewalk, I felt lighter. I said aloud, I am finally mine. My voice carried softly in the wind. Evan stayed on the bench, frozen, watching, but I didn't slow. I repeated, I choose peace. I choose me. And with that, I walked into the rest of my life. The morning sunlight hit the studio as I set my final piece on the display. I whispered, this is it. Everything we worked for. Clara appeared behind me. It looks incredible, she said. I smiled, letting the pride settle. I couldn't have done it without you. She shook her head. You did it yourself. I just helped you find your courage. Maya called during the launch. I'm so proud of you, she said. I laughed softly. It feels surreal. She asked, Are you happy? I paused. Yes. I think I finally am. Noah stopped by later, quietly observing the displays. He said, You've built something remarkable. I replied, It's just the beginning. He smiled. I can see your growth in every piece. Your past isn't your future. I nodded. I'm learning that. Slowly, carefully. We spoke about investors and marketing, but not about Evan. His messages had stopped. I whispered, Good. He doesn't belong here anymore. Clara glanced at me. Exactly. Focus on what's ahead. I ran my fingers over a bracelet I had just finished. I feel like I'm standing tall for the first time in years. Noah asked softly, Are you ready to trust again? I hesitated, then said, I'm afraid but not closed. I'm learning to let people in carefully. He nodded, giving me space without pressure. That's all anyone can ask. Later, Clara suggested a celebration for the launch. I said, Only a small one. She teased. You're cautious even in victory. I smiled faintly. It's habit. But I'm trying to change that. Maya came by in the evening. She hugged me tightly. You've changed, she said. I whispered, I think I have. Stronger, maybe. She nodded. Stronger and wiser. I walked through the studio looking at the displays. I murmured, This is my life. My work, my choices. Clara added, And your courage. Don't forget that. I nodded, feeling it sink in. Noah stayed late to help with inventory. He said quietly, I admire your patience. With your work. And with yourself. I answered, I've learned it's necessary. Everything else falls apart without it. At the end of the day, I stood by the window and whispered to myself, I don't need him anymore. Not as a lover, not as a shadow. He's a lesson, nothing more. I traced the sunlight across the room. I can move forward without looking back. Clara placed a hand on my shoulder. You've earned this peace. I smiled, feeling the weight lift. Yes. And I will protect it. I glanced at Noah as he packed up to leave. See you tomorrow? I asked. He nodded. See you tomorrow. Slowly, carefully, we'll keep building. I whispered. Exactly. Slowly, carefully, I'll keep building myself too. I turned back to my jewelry, running my fingers along the edges. I am standing tall. And I'm not looking back. The feeling was solid, quiet, and real. I breathed in, feeling my own strength, finally unshaken, finally mine. My phone buzzed. Lena's name flashed across the screen. I froze. I whispered, What does she want now? I tapped it open. Eva, how can you move on so fast? Do you know what you've done? Her words burned on the screen. I stared at them and muttered, She doesn't see herself at all. I typed back once. I'm not here to fight. I deleted it before sending. Another message appeared. You're ruining everything. I read it and laughed softly, bitterly. She doesn't realize she ruined it herself. I thought about Evan and her controlling ways, the jealousy that ate at their relationship. I whispered, Betrayal rots from the inside. I didn't need to respond. The truth was clear. I typed nothing. She called. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. I didn't answer. I whispered to myself, I don't owe her anything. Another message. You can't just erase me. I typed nothing. I stared at my phone and said, I won't argue. I won't explain. I called Maya. She's reaching out, I said quietly. She asked, Are you going to respond? I shook my head. No, I won't. Some lessons aren't for me to teach. She nodded. Good. That's wisdom. The messages kept coming. Angry, desperate, pleading. I whispered, Karma doesn't need me. It will do its work. My chest was heavy but steady. I opened Lena's last text. You moved on too well. You're cruel. I laughed, this time without bitterness. I typed nothing. I scrolled through my contacts and blocked her number. My phone vibrated once more, then went silent. I said aloud, This is not mine to carry. I closed the phone and set it on the counter. The silence that followed was heavier than anger, but cleaner. Later, Clara asked, "Are you okay?" I nodded. Yes. I don't need to fight. I've learned the consequences speak for themselves. She smiled. That's true strength. I repeated it to myself. Strength is silence. Strength is moving forward. Noah stopped by the studio quietly. He asked, "Did you manage?" I smiled faintly. I did. I didn't reply, I didn't argue. I just let it go. He nodded. That's the hardest part. I whispered, hardest but necessary. I walked past my workbench, brushing my fingers over the jewelry I had created. This is my life, I said. Not hers. Not his. The sunlight caught the edges of the pieces. I murmured, I am free from their chaos. Lena's anger no longer touched me. I whispered to myself, let her face the consequences of her own choices. I felt it. A quiet power rooted in letting go. I smiled faintly. Karma doesn't need my help. I only need my own strength. I turned back to my designs and whispered, I'll keep building. I'll keep moving. Nothing from the past can hold me anymore. The studio felt calm, steady mine. I repeated softly, I am free. I am standing tall. And this time I won't look back. I sat on the edge of my studio table, staring at the pieces I had created. I whispered to myself, you were so young, so trusting, so willing to give everything. My fingers traced a necklace. You loved too deeply and forgot yourself. I shook my head and said softly, it's okay. I forgive you. Noah appeared quietly. You've been thinking again, he said. I smiled faintly. I have to. About who I was, who I've become. He nodded. Do you regret any of it? I looked at him, hands folded. No. I regret not seeing my own strength sooner. He leaned against the table, careful not to crowd me. I should tell you something, he said. I asked, what? He looked away briefly. I care about you. More than friends. My heart skipped, but I didn't panic. I whispered, I'm scared of love. He smiled softly. I know. You don't have to rush anything. I'll wait. I exhaled. That's different. That feels safe. He said, because it is. I'm not here to replace the past. I'm here to be present. I nodded slowly, letting it sink in. I whispered to myself, I'm learning to love without losing myself. Noah said, you don't need to decide anything right now. I answered, I know. That's a first for me. I looked at the window, sunlight spilling across the floor. I used to think love was pain, a risk I couldn't escape. He asked, do you still think that? I shook my head. No. Love can feel safe if it comes on its own terms. He smiled. I'll respect your pace. Always. I whispered. Thank you. That matters more than words. He leaned back, giving me space. Take your time. I'll be here. I touched one of my creations and murmured, I'm proud of her. The woman I was. She survived everything, even when she didn't know she could. I looked at Noah. And I can choose love without fear now. He nodded, quietly happy. I traced a bracelet I had just finished. I understand her. I forgive her. I embrace who she was because she led me here. Noah asked, and who's here now? I smiled softly but firmly. I am. Fully. He didn't push, didn't speak over me. And that's enough, I said. I whispered to the empty studio. I am enough. I am whole. I am learning to let love in carefully, without losing myself. Noah stayed, giving me presence without pressure. I whispered again. I feel safe for the first time. Not desperate, not hollow. Just safe. He smiled and I knew I could trust this moment. I turned to my jewelry, fingers grazing the edges. I'm the woman I needed back then. And now I can live fully with or without anyone else. Noah nodded, silently agreeing. I whispered, I am finally free to be myself, to love slowly, to stand strong. I turned the corner and froze. There he was. Evan. Smaller somehow, hunched over, looking lost. I whispered to myself, this is it. One last time. He looked up and said, Eva. His voice cracked. I said nothing at first, just studied him. He added, how did you become so strong? I laughed softly, shaking my head. Strong. I asked quietly. You want to know about strength? He nodded, eyes wide. I took a breath. Strength didn't come from you. It came from the pain you caused me. But growth was my choice. He swallowed. I didn't realize. I shook my head. You didn't. And that's why it hurt so much. His lips trembled. I lost everything, didn't I? I nodded. Yes. But I gained myself. He looked down at his hands. I ruined everything. And I can't fix it. I whispered, no, you can't. And I don't need you to. I stepped closer, letting the words sink in. I'm not angry. I'm not bitter. I'm just done. He lifted his head. But you moved on. I nodded again. Not because I forgot or because I replaced you. Because I chose myself. That's the difference. He blinked, unable to speak. I said softly, I don't hate you. I don't even need to wish you pain. Life has a way of showing the consequences. He flinched slightly. I never wanted this for us. I smiled faintly, sad but steady. I know. But you made your choices. I made mine. He swallowed hard. I hope you're happy. I replied, I am. And it isn't because of what you lost. It's because of what I found. I brushed past him, walking steadily without looking back. He called after me, Eva, wait. I whispered under my breath. This is the final goodbye. My steps echoed lightly on the pavement. I didn't falter. I didn't hesitate. The air felt lighter with each stride. I glanced once over my shoulder. He looked broken, but I didn't stop. I whispered, I forgive myself. I forgive him. I am moving forward. My chest rose and fell steadily. The world didn't shake me anymore. I walked past the crowded street, feeling sunlight on my face. I whispered, I am strong. I am free. I am whole. My reflection in a shop window caught my eyes, steady, unshaken. He stayed behind, silent, watching me leave. I whispered again, I leave without hatred. I leave with peace. The wind brushed past me like a quiet blessing. I reached my own path and paused for a moment. I survived, I said softly. I grew. I chose myself. Each word felt real, solid. I smiled faintly. And now I walk fully into my life, free from the past. No one followed. No one could. I whispered once more. Goodbye, Evan. Goodbye to what was. And hello to everything I am becoming. My hands unclenched. My heart felt steady. I breathed in deeply and stepped forward. I was no longer defined by loss. I was defined by me. I stood in the middle of the studio, sunlight pouring over the workbenches and my designs. I whispered, I can't believe this is mine. Clara appeared from the back and said, It's all yours, Eva. You earned it. I smiled faintly. I did more than survive. I rebuilt. I touched a necklace I had just finished. Betrayal destroyed me, but it also rebuilt me, I whispered. My fingers traced the edges, smooth and solid. I was nothing, and now I am everything I chose to become. Noah entered quietly, carrying some documents. Morning, he said softly. I replied, Morning. He studied the room, then looked at me. You've grown so much. I laughed, a soft, steady sound. I had to. I couldn't stay the person I was. He nodded. And you didn't. That's what amazes me. You've built something no one can take away. I said, It's more than jewelry. It's proof. Proof I exist for myself first. The phone buzzed on the counter. I ignored it. Evan. I had heard through others he was struggling, that Lena was tearing their life apart. I whispered, I don't watch anymore. That's their life. Mine is here. Clara peeked at me. Good. Keep it that way. I nodded. This is my world now. I picked up a bracelet and turned to Noah. I'm still afraid of love, I admitted quietly. He smiled faintly. That's normal. But it doesn't have to stop you. I looked at him. I'm learning to let it in carefully. Slowly. On my terms. He nodded. Exactly. That's the way. I moved to the window, letting the sunlight warm my face. I remember the woman I was, I said softly. She loved too much, she trusted too much, she gave away herself. But she led me here. And I forgive her. Noah leaned on the bench. You're strong, Eva. Not just for surviving, but for choosing yourself. I smiled faintly. Strength isn't just standing tall. It's standing tall after falling apart. Clara called from the back. Lunch break. I nodded. Yes. But first, I want to look at my work. I walked slowly past the tables, fingers grazing each piece. Each one holds a piece of me. A part that refused to break completely. I whispered to myself, I don't need him anymore. I don't need anyone to validate me. I am enough. I am worthy. I am free. Noah watched quietly. You've truly become the woman you needed to be, he said softly. I nodded. Yes. And I will keep becoming her every day. The sunlight shifted, warming my shoulders. I took a deep breath. I choose my future, I whispered. I choose peace. I choose hope. I choose me. Clara came up beside me. You look happy, she said. I smiled, letting it settle. I am. I'm finally at a place where my past doesn't define me. My future is mine. I turned back to the studio, looking at every design, every tool. I stood tall once because I had to, I whispered. Now I stand tall because I want to, because I can, because I choose it. Noah said quietly, and you deserve this. I looked at him and nodded. Yes, I do. And so does the woman I was. And the woman I'll become. I stood in the sunlight, letting it pour over me. I whispered softly, I am reborn. I am strong. I am free. The room felt alive with quiet energy, my energy. I smiled, finally at peace, finally whole, finally myself. I walked to the center of the studio and said aloud, this is my life, my choice, my future, and I will live it fully. The warmth of the sun on my face felt like a blessing. I will stand tall always for me.